stuff. It's such a pleasure to be here today with all of you for this memorial ceremony. My sisters, Barbara Stockstill, Diane Moore, Mike Revnes, Mike Revnes Antonopoulos, not here with us, but here with her in spirit is Stephanie Rhodes Van Dyke. Many of you knew Rev as a dad, a grandfather, uncle, a friend, a business colleague. You may not have known that he was also a World War II veteran, a fighter pilot in the Pacific Realm, and part of the greatest generation. Richard Revnes, affectionately known to us as Rev or Daddy Rev, served his country in World War II as a Marine Corps pilot. And this memorial service is an honors tribute to Richard Revnes, whose 100th birthday will be today, January 24th. Rev died in 1990 at the age of 67. On December 7th, 1941, our father's world and those of millions of Americans changed dramatically with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. In his own words on that day, Rev asked the question, this is a quote from his autobiography, "Where the hell is Pearl Harbor?" Like so many more, he was about to learn a lot about Pearl Harbor and more about the world they were living in. At that time, Rev was an 18-year-old college student at Columbia University. Like many others his age, he enlisted to fight and serve his country, and he applied for the V-5 Navy program, and that enabled him to finish his sophomore year at Columbia. In the summer of 1942, after a battery of tests, he was accepted for flight training at the age of 19. He would report to pilot training that September at Manzanar in the California High Sierras. Does anyone know where Manzanar is? Over the next 2 years, Rev's training would take him from Manzanar to St. Mary's College, Livermore Naval Air Station for basic flight training, Corpus Christi, Texas for intermediate and instrument flight training, Cabinets Field for fighter training, and in August of 1943, dressed now in his Marine whites, he earned his gold wings. Next stop was New Bern, North Carolina, and then finally Parris Island, South Carolina, as a member of the Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 312. They were known as the Checkerboards. Next team deployment, first to El Toro Marine Air Station, and then a 5-day crossing to Pearl Harbor, where he had 3 months of additional training. Along this journey, there was some partying. Those of you who know my dad know he liked to party. There were lots of side hustles, card games, shenanigans, and some pretty girls who caught the eye of this handsome young man. You can see his photos right here. Rev was very personable and made many, many friends. It was now 1944, and this time in Hawaii was a pleasant time for Rev. There was plenty of flying, lots of time to explore and enjoy the islands, but all the while, Rev had an anxious anticipation of what the future might bring. Several of his mates died in plane accidents while training, which became a daily reality to bear. Finally, the order arrived to move on to the South Pacific. On the island of Espiritu Santo, there was more training and eventually a crash landing in the jungle on takeoff that landed Rev in the hospital for 2 weeks. The plane, loaded with a full tank of fuel, did not ignite, fortunately, as it took 2 hours to extract Rev from the wreckage. Although having been at the Pacific now for 14 months, longer than the usual tour of duty, his team, with encouragement from their skipper, agreed to stay on and become part of the advanced strike force for the invasion of Okinawa. The Battle of Okinawa was the last major battle of World War II. On Easter Sunday, April 1st, 1945, the Navy's 5th Fleet, more than 180,000 U.S. Army and Marines, descended on the island for the final push for Japan. While the Allied and Soviet troops had liberated most of Nazi-occupied Europe, that front was soon becoming to a conclusion. The Americans were still in a quagmire battling Japan to put an end to the war. The Rev's Marine Flight Unit had responsibilities that included protection of U.S. naval ships in the area, harassing Japanese ground forces, offering air support to our ground troops, and engaging the enemy in aerial combat. Over the next 2 months in Okinawa, Rev participated in 50 combat missions. On the first day of heated aerial combat, he had 2 kills as well as improbable, as just 4 squadron aircraft intercepted 20 Japanese Zeros with a total of 8 kills without a loss. He earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for this effort, his first of 2 such medals. The date was April 12, 1945, and upon landing back at the base, Rev heard the news that our president, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had died. The Battle of Okinawa, which lasted over 2.5 months, was the bloodiest battle of the Pacific campaign, with almost 250,000 casualties, including 14,000 American servicemen. In early June, Rev's team was relieved by a new squadron, and he returned back home to Beverly Hills. The Battle of Okinawa ended on June 22nd, and after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese surrendered on September 2, and the war was over 6 years and 1 day after it began. Upon his return home, the Marine Corps assigned Rev to the Pensacola Naval Air Station as a flight instructor, and with the conclusion of the war, Rev was relieved of duty in December of 1945. Many of you know the rest of Rev's story. He went on to a successful business career. With his first wife, Veronica, he had 3 children, Barbara, Diane, and myself. And in 1967, he married his second wife, Krista Antonopoulos, in Augusta, Georgia, and they had 3 children, Lori, Carmen, and Stephanie. Rev had an amazing life. He was brave. He was honorable. He loved his country. He loved his friends and family passionately. I want to take a moment to thank Carmen, Sister Carmen, for arranging this memorial service, originally scheduled to happen in early 2020, postponed at least 2 to 3 times. Carmen did a lot of work putting this all together, so thank you, Carmen. I also want to thank the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, who really did a fabulous job helping Carmen in this service. And I want to thank all the men and women who served nobly our country at war and in peace. And I believe we have a veteran here today, a peaceful veteran. Our Uncle Joe also was in the service, and I know many others of you who have family and friends who served. It is fitting that we're gathered here at the Los Angeles National Cemetery. Some of you may not know that Rev spent his teen years, grew up in this neighborhood. He lived at 311 Alpine Drive, North Alpine Drive in Beverly Hills, just a few miles north of here. He played golf at Windward Ho Golf Course that was just south of here. And he held various jobs at Miracle Mile Drugstore, Desmond's Men's Store, Westwood, and J&J 5 and 10, all in this neighborhood. After the war, he came back, and where is Madison? Right there. Madison, he completed his studies at UCLA. I know he would be happy and proud that all of you joined the service today. And on behalf of our family, thank you so very much for attending. If at this time anyone would like to step forward to offer and share some memories they have of Rev, please raise your hand. All right, I'm going to tell you 2. I thought of this morning. I remember Dad for a few expressions, and this tells you a lot about the character he had. When he saw that I was faced with problems because we worked together for so many years, he would say, "What would you do if your life depended?" It really puts things in perspective. You can find ways to make things happen. The other thing was, in the darkest hours, when things seemed really bad, quote Abraham Lincoln. And that quote was, "This too shall pass." Is there anyone who'd like to share a memory? Some of you are a little bit too young. Joe was 2 years old the last time he saw Krista and Rev came to Augusta with Lori, Carmen, and Stephanie to show. Krista wanted to show the girls where her family came from Hepzibah, Georgia, a little town outside of Augusta. And I know they had some wonderful memories of that time with Dad, and he was so proud. I was telling the story this morning. In training, he spent a fair amount of time in the South, and back then they had something called fatback, which is basically lard, fried lard. And we did a series of seminars when the girls and Krista came to the South, and we went to a restaurant in Atlanta for breakfast, and he was so ready to have eggs and hash browns and fatback, and he asked the server for fatback, and the server had no clue what he was talking about. He was a little disappointed, but his likes and wants were simple. He appreciated his vodka and Fresca.
Vodka and Fresca?
Yes.
And Crystal Light.
Yes. And then Crystal Light.
He didn't want the calories of Fresca.
Anybody else?